Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Rhythm Game Keyboard Review, and today we're going to be going over Logitech's very own K120. I've actually played on this keyboard quite a few times before, most notably back when I was an index player in 2013. There's actually a video of me playing, I believe it's Shmup. I got like 18 perfects or something like that, and then I think a AA disregard on it on index, so I was pretty capable of doing some pretty fast stuff on it. Other than that, I never really used it for spread. It just wasn't something I really wanted to do since I was primarily an index player, and whenever I tried it on spread, I didn't see a ton of success with it. But then again, I never really played spread, so it was hard for me to tell if it really performed that well in that regard. Fast forward about 6 years later, and a lot of you guys requested this, especially in my stream, to review the K120, given that it's been relatively infamous keyboard in the community. I know the player Shadow 1800, he was probably one of the best speed players in the entire game. He was capable of streaming like 450 streams and up. So he used the K120 at one point, so there was definitely some success to be made with this keyboard. It's just that there weren't many top players that used it at one point. So I was finally glad to get my hands on one of these. It obviously wasn't that hard given how cheap this keyboard is. I ordered it from Walmart's website since my local Walmart didn't have it, and I was pretty excited to try it given I haven't played on a membrane keyboard in about 4 or 5 years. And I gotta say, this thing's pretty good. The keycaps are smooth, the switches feel pretty fine, and overall I never felt uncomfortable at one point playing on it. Again, it is a membrane keyboard, and a pretty cheap one at that. You can get it about like $10 at Target and about $15 at really any other retail store. I'm actually still surprised that there are so many keyboards out there that are probably worth $50, $60, even $70 and are frankly outshined by the pure fundamentals this K120 has. So with that said, let's pretty much break down how this keyboard performs overall. So the first thing you should be aware of is that physically you are going to be pretty limited at first, especially if you're like me, transferring from a mechanical keyboard after using it for so long, building up the muscle memory for all those Cherry MX or Gateron switches, so you kind of have to adjust for that. With this in mind, I was normally playing around a difficulty or two below my peak physical capability in Eterna, so if you are playing on this keyboard and you happen to be at your peak skill when obtaining this keyboard, don't be too discouraged if you're not getting PBs right out of the gate. Looking around, I did find some general actuation force ranges to be from 55 grams to 65 grams, and I'm probably going to go with 65 grams because this keyboard felt marginally heavier than my Gateron Browns, which are about 45 grams. Once you do get a general feel of the switches overall, it becomes a pretty harmless adaptation process. So going into the specific skill sets, speed files felt pretty average overall. I didn't really notice any CB rushes, and I didn't notice an increase or decrease in them. Trilling felt fine as well, but there were times where I was hitting way too light, especially at the beginning of stream files, where you're not exactly acclimated to the muscle memory of the switches. So at the beginning of speed files, I would usually miss like 2 or 3 notes, and then I would kind of ease into the streams. But other than that, speed files felt pretty good overall. To really even call it a flaw would be kind of unfair. As I noted before, stamina files did feel like I had to work a bit harder than I had to obtain certain scores. I felt like once I got tired, I had to conserve energy, and conserving energy on a keyboard that is much heavier can be a very difficult process, especially when you bottom out the keys. There were some instances, however, where I was playing hand stream, I had notably more control when I was playing, especially with one-hand trill transitions, and the same goes for two-hand trill transitions. So when you're doing a motion like a two-hand trill motion, and you try to transition into, like, let's say, some sort of any other pattern really, like after a long two-hand trill transition, it was pretty comfortable. Whereas with a mechanical keyboard, I would feel my hands shifting back and forth or up and down a little bit, and it was pretty uneasy overall. But with this keyboard, I didn't notice that at all. I don't know if this is because of the heavier switches that allow me to control my fingers better, but it was definitely a good quality that I would probably want to look for other keyboards in the future. Minijacks aren't really too great on this thing, which isn't really a surprise. When I noted on my Matthias Linear keyboard review how Minijacks were the biggest thing about that keyboard given how light the switches were, it wasn't too much of a surprise when a keyboard of double the actuation force didn't really excel in this feature, since with the quick double tapping motion, it wouldn't register. This could be a problem in some technical files that do require fast Minijack motions, but in other files with anchory patterns, it can be quite a perk since, again, you can control your hands a lot better and the transitions are much more smooth. As for core jacks, they felt pretty decent overall. Didn't really notice anything too much. Again, referring back to the stamina trait, I had to play a little below my peak physical capability, but I didn't notice anything drastic that would pretty much not want me to play those files ever. Sometimes I would drop misses from being too conservative, or I just would simply strike the key wrong, because you really do have to lock into that muscle memory in order to hit the keys consistently properly. But again, just the nature of the keyboard, and not me being used to it. Lastly, accuracy was pretty solid overall, and especially with a membrane keyboard like this thing can take quite a beating. Since you are playing on a membrane keyboard, you can pretty much hit this thing as hard as you want, and you don't really run into the risk of a keyboard over-tapping or anything like that. Your biggest worry with the K120 is that the keys will simply wear out. So if you are an upper tier accuracy player who really likes to beat the keys up, really likes to get in there and try for some Judge 7 or Justice scores, or for Osamania maybe some Hard Rock scores, or some Million scores, you get the gist. This keyboard is pretty good for that, and it's a great alternative if you need to play accuracy and don't want to have a mechanical keyboard in store. Durability wise, I pretty much had no issues with it. No dropped inputs, no double taps. Your biggest worry again is just the keys simply wearing out, and given all the reviews I've seen, not just from casual keyboard users on Amazon or various other websites, but just from players of the game over the last decade or so, this keyboard has been known to be one of the best keyboards, especially for its price. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this keyboard. There's really not a lot of bad things I could say about it. Other than that, I just played slightly below my physical capabilities. But again, if I probably played on this keyboard for, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, or if it became my main keyboard, I could see myself not just playing at my peak physical capability for it, but maybe exceeding those expectations given some of the weird qualities that it seemed to have, such as the one-hand shoulder transitions, or the two-hand shoulder transitions, and just kind of having full control over your hands is just something that I found to be quite refreshing. It's cheap, it's durable, and it does a surprisingly better job than most of the keyboards I've ever played on. I'm going to give the K120 a solid 7. This thing is really solid. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel, and if you would like to see more rhythm gaming content like this, feel free to check out my Patreon along with my other links below. I'll see you all whenever a video I upload next, and take care.